Well, boys and girls, we finally made it. You can now see the top of my head. My name is Luke from Casual Experts, and I've spent the past little over a year reading Stephen King novels and doing very little else. And I've having a really great time doing it. So I've read more. So let's qualify what this list is. Let's set the rules. I'll be talking about the novels, not the novellas or the short stories. A novella is basically a short novel, and so I am qualifying that as anything less than 200 pages. Anything over that counts as a novel, anything less than that is a novella. A short story, I will say, is anything less than 50 pages. So, those are just the rules that I set up for this list, and I have read more novels than these 10, but I want to do around number 10, and after I read 20, I'll probably do a top 20. But yeah, I've also read some short stories, I've read some novellas. The one that came out a couple weeks ago, Slide In Road, he just published in Esquire magazine, and it's very, very good. I highly recommend it. Number 10, because I only own 9, so number 10 is a book that I read that I do not have. It is The Institute. It's his most recent novel. Came out in September of 2019, I believe. And I have a lot of complicated feelings about this. Like, none of the books that I've read are, I would say, bad, but this is, it's definitely the most intense, and it's not, I would say it's not the most intense, it's one of the most intense ones, but it's not as rewarding, and the characters just aren't as interesting as some of the other ones. So the characters just aren't memorable. I do like the story, I do like the ending. I actually cried at the end of this book, believe it or not. But yeah, it's my least favorite of these 10 that I have here. And it's just complicated. I don't know, because I mean, sometimes he writes really good kids, sometimes he writes really, really bad kids, and in this case, the kids aren't great. And also, there's just so many kids that it's just hard to keep track of them all. And so, without giving away too much, the premise basically is this institute. It's like a global organization, and they kidnap kids with special abilities, either telekinesis or telepathy, I believe the other one is, and also precognition. And they kidnap people with those abilities, and then they kind of exploit them and manipulate them to the organization's benefit. All in all, it's not a bad book, but I don't see myself reading it again. I don't even see myself going out and buying it, because it's just, I read it one time, I rented it from the library when it first came out. It's not great, it's not bad. I heard they're making a TV show out of it, and I'm really interested to see how that goes. But yeah. Moving on. Number 9. This is going to be the first of many controversial decisions in this video, but this one is The Outsider. This was his 2018 novel. But yes, so this is essentially, without spoiling too much, it's basically it, but toned way, way down. That's basically what The Outsider is. This is the fourth book featuring Holly Gibney, and she's a sort of she's a private investigator, and she was in the Bill Hodges trilogy. I haven't read any of those books yet, and she's also in If It Bleeds. I read If It Bleeds, but a lot of people are very divided on her character. A lot of people really like her. Some people don't. I tend to not really like her. In this book, I haven't read. She could be really good in Mr. Mercedes and those other books, but this one's not. She's not great in this one. The character that I do enjoy is Ralph Anderson. I do enjoy him. But the best thing about this book is the mystery. But it is kind of anticlimactic, which is a criticism that King gets a lot. I don't necessarily think that a lot about most of his stuff, but this book especially is very anticlimactic. I did enjoy it, especially the middle, and yeah, mostly the middle. I enjoyed. I will say this, which is another unpopular opinion, but I'm not a fan of the TV show either. So yeah, leave your comments about that. Continuing on the controversial hot takes train, number 8 is The Shining. I did enjoy the ending of this book a lot. I did actually like this book quite a bit. The middle section that I don't like, because essentially what The Shining is, you know the story, The Shining. It's two parents and a son, and they are the winter caretakers of a hotel that is haunted. And the son has The Shining. It's a mental ability that we see come up a lot in Stephen King books. And the hotel is kind of using that Shining as a battery to sort of power the ghosts and the monsters and all that stuff that's in this hotel. But it doesn't really start happening until the last third of the novel. The middle third is basically just 3 people trapped in a hotel yelling at each other. And again, I do enjoy the ending of this book, but that middle section is just kind of boring. I do really love the characters. Dick Halloran's fantastic. Dan Torrance is great, both as a child and as an adult. We'll get into that later. But yeah, I mean, The Shining, it's good, but it's just not one of my favorites. Number 7, this is Misery. This one came out. The Shining was his 3rd novel, by the way, if you were interested in it. This one came out in the late 80s, I believe, Misery. And this one I really enjoyed quite a bit. Not only is it just a good book on its own, but it's also talks about the creating writing process. And I did a review on this book and the movie as well. Fantastic movie, by the way. And that's on my channel. But yeah, this book is really, really good. And this does something I think that The Shining doesn't do as good. Because for the most part, there's just 2 people that are trapped in a house. Well, they're not trapped. One person's trapped. So basically, writer Paul Sheldon gets kidnapped by a huge fan of his who's also a psychopath, Annie Wilkes. And for the most part of the book, it's just the 2 of them in Annie's house. But it never gets boring. It's very brutal, very interesting. It's a good book. Number 6, Salem's Lot. Again, the characters in this book are not as good as some of the other ones, but I do really like this book. It's basically vampires, but new. And like I said in my review of this book and the miniseries, it's one of my favorite vampire things. I'm not a huge fan of vampires, but this is very, very good. This is Stephen King's 2nd novel, and I enjoy it a lot. Like I said, the characters aren't great, but it's more about the atmosphere of this town, Salem's Lot, and the town itself really is a character. I know it's a cliche thing to say, but it's true. It's a character in the story. And this book introduces a lot of things that we'll see explored more further on in Stephen King's library. But yeah, this book is really, really good, and I would highly recommend it. Number 5, Needful Things. This was the 2nd Stephen King book review I did. It's huge. I'm just going to put it down right there. Can't see the title. Damn it. I really, really enjoyed this book. This is a book where a demon opens a store in a small town, and he sells things for really cheap, but also you have to pull a prank on somebody. And it's just the depictions of just greed and utter depravity that are in this book it's mind-blowing. The characters are fantastic. The story's really great. I really, really do love this book. The movie is not great at all. I did a review on it, but this book is great. It's so great. For like the first, I would say, not half, but for the first third of it, it's mostly just you're learning the connections of the people, and while you're reading, you're like, why am I wasting so much time with this Hallmark drama? But then as soon as you get past that, you understand, okay, we had to learn these connections because this Leland Gaunt, the demon, is going to manipulate them, and so it's important that we know how these people relate to one another, so that when this happens, we're more invested in the story, I think is a good way to put it. Revival. This was his 2014 novel. It's heavily inspired by H.P. Lovecraft, and so you're familiar with him, you know these crazy monsters, and this book has a lot of crazy monsters and just weird supernatural stuff. I will say the characters aren't that interesting, but it's a short book, so I mean, they're more interesting than, say, like The Outsider, but they're not as interesting as something like The Stand or It. But it's a short book, and just the craziness that happens, you don't really focus on the characters that much at all. Which is surprising given this is a Stephen King novel, but anyway, it follows this sort of ex-Methodist preacher, and he, after his wife dies, he becomes obsessed with trying to figure out the afterlife. And so we kind of follow him throughout the decades. We meet back up with him every 10 years or so. And at the end of his life, he finally sees the afterlife, but it's not what he expected. And it's just crazy. This book is amazing. The monsters are crazy. I just love the monsters in this book. It's just, it's great. I love it. Number 3. Now, this is another controversial pick. I know that a lot of people don't care for this book as much, but this book is very special to me because it's the very first Stephen King book that I read, and it is Dr. Sleep. I picked it up about a week before it came out in theaters, and I finished it in less than that time. I finished this book in less than a week, because I bought it a week before it came out, and I finished it, and I saw it the movie when it came out, and it's just, I love this book. It's great. It's a sequel to The Shining, and it follows adult Dan Torrance as he sort of battles alcoholism and also learns how to manage The Shining, and he becomes what I love about it is it's sort of like, I tell people this is the original Star Wars trilogy, and The Shining would be the prequels, because this is like Luke Skywalker sort of battling the same things that Anakin Skywalker did. But Anakin Skywalker succumbs to the dark side, but Luke overcomes it. That's basically what these books are. But yeah, this is sort of... the monsters in this book aren't really vampires, but they kind of are. I love them, the True Not. They're great. I'm trying to separate this book from the movie, because they're two separate things. I love them both a lot, but... this book is just really, really cool. And it was the first one that I read, so I have a huge bias towards it. I actually read this before The Shining, which is crazy, but I really like the depictions of alcoholism and just the bleakness of that. Also, there's a lot of AA stuff in here because Stephen King, in the 80s, he suffered from a lot of substance abuse problems, but in the 90s and early 2000s, he sort of cleaned up his act. And this book is kind of him retelling those, but through fiction, and I just really enjoy this book a lot. Also, it's about Danny. Well, he's called Dan because he's an adult. No adult's called Danny. But he sort of meets this little girl who has The Shining, and he sort of trains her. Again, another Star Wars parallel, but he sort of brings her up, sort of like a Luke and Rey kind of relationship in the Last Jedi. I think that movie was. I don't remember. The Stand. This is, I think, Stephen King's biggest book. It's either that or it. But yeah, this was, I think, his fifth novel. Originally, when he published it, the publisher had to remove 500 pages of it, and they're here. 400 of those pages were restored. 100 of them he left out because he didn't think they were necessary. This book is, I believe, this version of it is 1,153 pages. So it is a crazy big book. Most of it I love. I love a lot of the characters. Some of them are not great. They're not bad. I wouldn't say they're bad like these other books, but some of them aren't as great. Some of them are really good. The thing that I love the most about this book is just the way that it depicts its world. So a lot of this other books, in fact, all of them, all these books here, except for The Outsider, take place in the same world. But The Stand takes place in a separate world than all of those. So there are at least 3 Stephen King worlds that are present here in this video, but there are more, obviously. But the way that this book depicts its post-plague world, so basically in The Stand, a virus breaks out and kills 99.5% of the world's population, I believe. And so the depictions of just the post-world, I'm sorry, not the post-world, the post-virus world in The Stand are really, really great. And it's just this crazy post-apocalyptic world that Stephen King thought up. It's honestly the best fantasy world in a novel that I've read. Second place would probably be Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, Blade Runner, but that's neither here nor there. But just the world that he's able to just build, it's just amazing. Basically, the survivors are split into 2 factions. They fight against each other, good, evil. There's a lot of, one thing that surprises me a lot is that this book has a lot of religious parallels. And if you're a reader of Stephen King, especially Revival, I'm surprised that this book is, I don't want to say anti-religious, but it pokes a lot of jabs at sort of, I would say like televangelists and revival ministers and sort of that whole thing, faith healers, that kind of thing. This book is kind of the opposite of that, I would say. Very religious. There are a lot of religious parallels all over this book. And yeah, the miniseries is fantastic. There's another one on the way. It comes out in less than a month. I'll be covering that on the channel, so subscribe if you're interested. But yeah, this book is very, very good. And the world that it builds around it is just amazing. So, on to number 1. This should be no one's surprise, but It. My number 1 favorite Stephen King novel is It. And you shouldn't be surprised. I love this book so much, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the scary clown. I love the clown, but it has nothing to do with, that's not, if this book was only about a clown, it would not be my favorite book. There's so many other things in this book that I love that have nothing to do with the clown. The clown's great, and I love the clown, and there's just some crazy, crazy psycho crap that happens, not psycho, just like mind-bending stuff that happens at the end of this novel, and it's quite just, it's breathtaking. The end of this novel is just insane. But I think this novel really, it touches on so many things, and it's so huge. This copy, 1157 pages. And I just love this book so much. The characters in it seem, the way that they're depicted, the way the kids are depicted, the way they're depicted as adults are just so, so good. So if you're living under a rock and not familiar with the story of It follows a group of friends who come across It, a evil clown, shapeshifter, dimension-hopping thing that eats people. And they battle it when they're kids, and they come back 27 years later, and they battle it when they're adults. And it's just a really, really great book. Honestly, it's just great. If you're a fan of just fantasy in general, I would recommend either of these 2 books. If you're a fan of just thick, huge-ass fantasy novels, either read The Stand or It. Or read them both. They're just amazing works of fiction. And that, I love it. It's incredible. But yeah, that's about it for right now. That's about it for this video. If you disagreed with anything, leave it down below in the comments. If I didn't even mention your favorite Stephen King novel, comment down below what that is, and I might read it and then do it in my top 20. But yeah, I'll also mention that I am reading The Green Mile and Pet Sematary. Not at the same time, of course. I'm reading them at the same time. It's crazy. Whoa! But yeah, I really enjoyed Green Mile. I haven't finished it yet. I've read the first 2 sections of it. It's split into 5 sections. I've read the first 2. I'm really enjoying this one. Pet Cemetery. This is complicated. I'm about halfway through this one, and it's extremely intense. This book is literally about death, and like, well, doesn't people die in every Stephen King novel? Yes, they do, but this book is literally, the subject matter is death, how different people react to death, and it's just the depictions of death are very, very bleak, and I don't want to say intense, like The Stand is intense. This book is not intense. It's, I would say, what's the word? It's unfiltered, very in your face. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. It's not a bad book. It's a very good book, but it's just not for everybody. I would say I'd recommend every book probably except The Institute and this one. But every other book I've read, they're great, essentially. Some more than others, but yeah, this book is very complicated and not for younger readers. Well, Stephen King isn't for younger readers anyway, so yeah. So make sure to subscribe, check out our Patreon for exclusive videos. Check out our Facebook group and Instagram pages in the links below. Make sure to subscribe and comment and all that fun jazz. I will see you on Friday. Peace out.